The field of digital learning is sort of both very new and also not new. I mean, one of the interesting things about this university, the University of Illinois, is that the world's first e-learning system was created here, and it began in 1959-60, a thing called Plato. So in one measure, digital learning has been around for a long time. I mean, that's sort of, 40, 50, oh no, it's actually more than that. It's 50-something years ago. On the other hand, I mean, it's an area which is still emerging and where, in a lot of ways, I think we've barely scratched the surface of what's possible. I think we could do some excitingly different things which are fundamentally different from the traditional classroom architecture. So we can use digital tools to do something dramatically different in education. Let me give you a couple of examples. We used to have, I shouldn't say used to, we still do. We have this artifact called the test, which happens at the end of a period of learning, the end of the week or the end of the semester or the end of the course, whatever it is. So you do this test. And what we do with digital tools is we've created computer-based testing. Okay, fair enough, we've really changed nothing. But we're in a world now of what's popularly called big data, where we could be collecting information about every single thing a student does, every keystroke, every idea, every interaction with another student, every interaction with every little grain of knowledge. And with that, we can actually do away with the test. We can actually be keeping a constant running record of what students are doing, giving the student feedback as they go, by the way, formative assessment, but also giving the teacher comprehensive information about learners and also anyone else, parents, anybody else who in the world of accountability wants to know what learners have learned. So for me, I mean, one of the huge changes now is these new digital environments offer us opportunities to fundamentally transform assessment. Another example of an area of fundamental transformation is something as simple as classroom discussion. So here's the traditional classroom architecture. The teacher's at the front of the room, the teacher asks a question, one student puts up their hand and gives an answer, and the teacher evaluates that answer. This is classical classroom discourse. And the teacher says, yes, that's right, you got that answer right. Well, in fact, when we translate that into an activity stream type environment like Twitter or Facebook or whatever, and a number of these new learning technologies do that, including technologies we've been developing ourselves here at the University of Illinois, a number of enormously important things happen. Firstly, it can happen live in the classroom, but secondly, it doesn't have to happen in the classroom. It can happen overnight. So this is ubiquitous learning, anywhere, anytime. But the other thing is that instead of one student putting up their hand and giving the answer and the teacher saying, yes, that's right, or that's wrong, because, by the way, that's really about second-guessing what the teacher expects the answer to be. That's really what it's about. Every single student responds all at once in a kind of a Twitter-like feed. Everyone can see everyone else's response. And a number of dramatically interesting things happen that we've shown in our research. Firstly, the cognitive intensity goes up, and it's not boring. Really, sitting and listening to one student answering the answer for you is boring. Secondly, the person who puts up their hand and who's keen to answer is the last person who should be answering the question. It's the most inappropriate person usually who does answer the question for one reason or another. So this way everybody answers. We have an audit trail of what everybody said and everybody's expected to answer. And the students who are nervous about putting up their hand and speaking have a moment before they press the comment button. Right? They have a moment to think, which gives them a little bit more leeway about not feeling nervous in the classroom. But another very interesting thing happens. Instead of guessing the correct answer, what we get, let's say it's a class of 20 kids or 30 students or whatever it is, the answers all come out slightly different and conversations begin between the students. And you know what? If you're in a room of students all together, this is what our research has showed us in very interesting ways. I talk to this student, then that student over there, then that student over there, and sometimes I say something orally as well. It's a reasonably quiet classroom where there's oral things going on, but a lot of this textual work going on. It's an interestingly rich conversation where diversity becomes visible. So for us, it looks like a simple transition from classroom oral conversation through to conversation around an activity feed, but in fact there are some incredible transformations going on. Now, what I say is, look, this is not just different. I actually think this is significantly better than traditional classroom conversation. We can do much higher intensity engagement, and in fact the learners that we have today, the new generation of learners who are used to high levels of cognitive load in social media, in video games, in today's media, in fact they are going to find those traditional discursive and pedagogical forms even more boring than some of us did in the good old days. So this is not a generation which is going to put up with things which aren't fully engaging. Now I think in these environments it's possible to engage learners fully in a way that just was never possible before. Schools today are very uneven in the way they're engaging learners. There are some schools which are just, I don't know how the kids sit there, to be quite frank. You know, it's conventional classroom structures. And by the way, they don't sit there. It translates into discipline problems and failure to learn. But also, I mean, I'm lucky in the job that I have at the University of Illinois. I have a whole lot of master's students who are practicing teachers in my online courses. And they're people who are sort of self-selected in a way. They've chosen to do our courses here on innovative pedagogy and using new technology in learning. So it's a self-selected group. I'm amazed by what they're doing, and the sort of classrooms that they describe in the work that they do and that they talk about in our classes, our online classes, are really amazing. I mean, engaging places where, for example, you know, differentiated instruction. There are students working at their own pace in different parts of the classroom. There are students working collaboratively, the whole idea of collaborative learning and collective intelligence, working in groups. You know, I have students where alternately the teacher's working with one student, but there are 3 teachers in a class of 120 students all in an open space which looks like a coffee lounge or something. So I'm very excited to see these incredibly engaging environments emerging. Unfortunately, I think that it's a minority of classrooms at this stage. We've got a fair way to go. One of the interesting aspects of the moment is that this is an area of retrenchment in education. It seems like it's we're resource scarce at the moment. That's what it seems. What's interesting at the moment is one area of huge investment, particularly by the private sector, to some degree by the government sector as well, but certainly by the private sector, is in educational technology and innovation. In the United States, it's a hugely burgeoning area. So one of the issues is how do we link educational researchers into those technology development companies, and there are very strong relationships that are developing. So in other words, if we want to reinvent the future in a whole lot of ways, we need to build these partnerships between researchers and the companies that are inventing all the technologies. This work is very, very important, and it's exciting work, to be quite frank, because I do think we're at an extraordinary set of turning points in education. So if we had these the conventional architecture of the classroom, which was invented 150 years ago, teachers at the front, textbooks, classroom discourse, all that kind of stuff, that we're just on the turning point of completely changing all of that. And it's a very exciting moment when I think we can influence the next generation of learners. One of the interesting things about technologies is technological development is not even. It comes in bursts, and then there's stability for a while. And I have a sense that we're in this a burst of technological change in education at the moment. The shape of the future is not quite obvious yet, but we're right in the middle of it, which is very, very exciting. And I think that, within 5 years or a decade, the world will be a very different place, and then it might stabilise again for a while, as it did for the last century and a half. It's a great time to be doing this research.